Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. So honored to have this great spiritual teacher, this great leader with us today. Indeed, what else can one say about the woman who wrote The Return to Love, a book that profoundly changed my life, A Woman's Worth, A Woman's Worth. There are so many books. She's written more than a score of them. And now she's running for president once again. And I was sharing with her how happy I am to see people who take God seriously, who really believe, coming into this public space, into the political space, so that they can become the game changers in this space. I'm speaking of no one other than Marianne Williamson. Indeed, in The Nation, the article put it this way: from the third way to the third eye, opening ourselves up, everybody. When one asked her why she was running, and I want you to speak to this. You said the status quo will not disrupt itself. Indeed, power protects itself. And so you are coming in as a disruptor of the status quo. Is that an accurate characterization? And if so, why and what is the status quo in your thinking?
By the way, the status quo, as we know, is an unholy alliance of government with corporate power, in which it's now baked into the cake that the majority of our public policy, certainly on a federal level, but even more and more now, even on state levels, but definitely on a federal level, public policy does more on a routine basis to serve the bottom line goal of short-term profit maximization for huge corporate entities than it does to serve the health and the safety and the well-being of the American people or the planet or the people of the world. And this is now so baked into the cake that unless there is an intervention by the people, nothing will really change. One party is much worse than the other, but at this point, it's the difference between moving quickly towards the iceberg or moving slowly towards the iceberg. We need to turn this ship around. We need fundamental economic reform in this country. When you have 20% of Americans who live basically within an economy that works for them, 20% in the richest country in the world is not enough. And that 20% is surrounded by a vast sea of economic despair. And this kind of income inequality, opportunity inequality, is absolutely unsustainable. But at this point, I think we've all seen enough elections. We've all seen enough about how things work that it's time for the people ourselves to stage an intervention, because everyone who is locked within that system is on some level acquiescing and obeying the dictates of a basically corporate aristocracy.
We're talking with Marianne Williamson, brilliant presidential candidate. Many of us know her as one of the great spiritual teachers of our age, but she's been a fighter. You know, Dr. King talked about not just being too holy and too your head too up in the clouds. I'm paraphrasing right now, to be any earthly good. But, you know, I believe that people of God need to be involved in these discussions about poverty, about hunger. You know, Marianne Williamson, my father, my pastor, Reverend Clay Evans, said, "I've never seen God make a mouth he could not feed." And that goes to the heart of poverty in America. That goes to the heart of, as you talk about, this corporate takeover that we've seen where they're driving inflation, Ms. Williamson. I mean, and they're unchecked.
Absolutely. And they will not check themselves. That's what's become obvious at this point. At this point, you know, first of all, you know, shame on them. At this point, shame on us if we just allow this to continue. You were talking about Martin Luther King before. Martin Luther King has a famous quote about how any religion that purports to care about the soul of a man but does not address the economic conditions that shackle him and the social conditions that oppress him is a moribund religion awaiting burial. And
Absolutely.
We see in America today how many people in the name of God seem more concerned with controlling women, more concerned with tax cuts for the very wealthy, more concerned with demonizing immigrants or transgender or whomever is on their hate list for that day in the name of God. But we know that God shall not be mocked, right? God is not mocked, and it's time for those of us who believe that God is love to stand up for that principle within the public domain as well as in the personal.
Well, I see you looking to establish justice, in a merciful way. What does that look like? Particularly, you have been quite forward about your views on reparations and the need for them. Reparations for whom, and what would they look like?
Well, talking about all these spiritual principles, to me, we need an overlay of spiritual principle on our public conversations. And a spiritual principle that you see among the Catholics in confession, you see it among the Jews, the holiest day of the year being the Day of Atonement. You see it in Alcoholics Anonymous, where you have to admit the exact nature of your wrong. We see that whether you see these things in religious or in secular terms, it is simply the case that you cannot move forward in your life until and unless you clean up the past. So, and this is not to minimize the sacrifices of anybody, any of our ancestors, in moving things forward on the issue of race in the United States. We had a civil war, we had a civil rights movement, we had a Civil Rights Act, we had the Voting Rights Act. I'm not saying nothing has moved forward, but we also know that some things have moved forward and some things have actually moved backwards. And we know that there is this huge leg of the stool that has never been addressed. And that is economic, financial remuneration of not only for slavery, not only for 250 years of almost 250 years of the institution of slavery, but also another 100 years of institutionalized suppression of black people in the American South. So to me, it's actually quite transactional. There is a debt that is owed. And I think that until we address that fundamental fact, not just with incremental approaches, but as a fundamental issue, then we will continue to pass along a very toxic baton from one generation to another. And I think this could be the generation that deals with it. And that's why I would be the president on whose watch we would actually put a plan on the table. Let's get this thing started. I lived in Detroit for a long time, and I knew John Conyers. John Conyers was a friend of mine. In a way, he was a mentor of mine. And I'm sure you knew John. But John himself, if he were here today, I'm sure you would agree with me, he would be rolling his eyes at the idea that H.R. 40 is enough right now. Mm-hmm. And to see a president, oh, yes, I agree with that, but it should be Congress. This is a classic kick the ball, can down the road technique. We don't need any more evidence. We know what happened, and that's why I have a reparations plan, and I think it's time to just get on with one and effectuate it. I think mine is a good one, but it's with any negotiation, it's where you start.
Well, but you're right, but I think, you do get pushback because many people say, look, I just got here a generation ago, or I just got here, and why do I need to repair, restore, pay back black people for, it wasn't free labor, it was unpaid labor. It built the country, actually. What do you say to them?
Well, this is the kind of narrative that results from an age in which we think it's only about you or it's only about me. We have lost the sense it's about us. My grandparents came here from Russia and Poland. Obviously, they didn't own slaves. That's irrelevant. I am, as an American citizen, I inherit the assets and the debits of my country. This is about what America owes, and this is not just about me. And at a certain point, none of our children will be safe unless all of our children are safe. We have to get over this notion that we can wall ourselves off from the karmic debts that belong to the whole. This is about something bigger than any of us individually. It's about the nation itself.
Media has changed, and the means of communicating have changed tremendously. Now we don't have to depend upon, say, the largesse of the media to get our messages through. And so to that end, you have started these Firelight chats. Now, I'm mindful of fireside chats, but yours are Firelight chats. Where did that name come from, and when can we participate?
Well, of course, it's an homage to FDR's Fireside Chats. When I read a book, there's an incredible book, actually, called No Ordinary Time, about Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. And one of the things I learned from that book in a way that I had never fully appreciated, and this was true of Lincoln as well, was the Civil War and the emancipation of slavery and all of that. Presidents who knew that they could not effectuate the changes they wanted to unless the people themselves were enrolled in that goal. And so presidents who have used the bully pulpit, who have actually talked to people. So sometimes people will say to me, well, Marianne, how can I tell people what your campaign stands for? We're not living at a time when you can just say to people, go to my website because it's all there, because people don't necessarily do that these days. So I have told people that every Wednesday night, there will be what I call a firelight chat, once again, an homage to the fireside chats of FDR, in which I'm addressing issues that I think are important. People can understand from that what are the issues that she thinks are important and who are the kinds of people she would listen to. For instance, our first one last week was about labor. This coming week will be about Israel and Palestine with a Palestinian-American political analyst named Omar Badar, and the legislative director at J Street, Josh Lockman. I think it's a way for all of us to learn, but also it's a way for people to learn what I stand for as a candidate and would stand for as a president. We'll talk about the military budget. We'll talk about the environment. We'll talk about reparations. We'll talk about racial reconciliation, justice issues, and so forth. And then on Sunday nights, on TikTok, we'll do an Ask Me Anything, where I'll just talk about anything people want to talk about. And, it's interesting. A political campaign is one long job interview. You're getting to know the candidate. Who are you? Who is this woman who's running? And what would she do if we gave her this job? And that's what I'm trying to do with the Firelight Chats. And people can find out about that on Marianne 2024 and on all of my social media channels.
We're talking with Marianne Williamson, presidential candidate. Yes, that Marianne Williamson. She's got some brilliant ideas. I've first heard you and Dennis Kucinich put forth a Department of Peace. A real program in which people are trained in peacemaking. Please explain that. I mean, because you said, okay, as we serve in the military, you need to serve, in a Department of Peace. I mean, we need to, and that's something that is so foreign to our thinking, but it shouldn't be.
That's absolutely right. We have a military academy. We should also have a peace academy. At a military academy, you get educated, and you get educated in the skills of war. And then if your country needs you, those skills are put to use on the battlefield. A peace academy works in much the same way. You learn the skills of peace building. A lot of people don't realize that peace building is an actual expertise. There are 4 factors which, if present in any situation, it could be a corner of the United States or it could be another corner of the world. If these factors are present, statistically, there will be a higher incidence of peace and a lower incidence of violence. Those factors are, number 1, greater economic opportunities for women, greater educational opportunities for children, reduction of violence against women, and a reduction of human suffering, unnecessary human suffering. You can go into any community. If your proactive efforts are to manifest those goals, greater education for children, greater economic opportunity for women, reduction of violence against women, and an amelioration of human suffering, you will have greater peace. Because those are the humanitarian values that actually create greater harmony within human beings and among human beings. So if you look, let's look at the U.S. military budget. Okay, the U.S. military budget is something like $848 billion now. So what is the State Department budget, which is diplomatic solution and problem solving? That's about $70 billion. Look at that disparity between the State Department, the diplomatic efforts at creating the world we want, versus the military. And we know how much of our military budget is based on constant reports that are coming out now about price gouging from defense contractors, the undue influence of what's called the military-industrial complex on our foreign policy. Then within the State Department, you have what's called a USAID, and that is the budget. It's something like $8 billion, and this is people who go and they build wells and they build bridges and they do the things that actually help people in their lives. That's how you promote your values. That's how you promote your democratic values. That's how you promote your human values. And I would argue that the USAID does more to create a peaceful world than the U.S. military does. If you look at the military's actions in Afghanistan, you look at the military's actions in Iraq, I would argue that they have done more to create insecurity than security in world affairs, including attitudes towards our own country.
We're talking with Marianne Williamson about her presidential campaign. She's polling north of 9%, about 10% of the voters at this time, at least, as has been reported. And, you know, having been on this presidential merry-go-round a few times, get it, you know, because I understand how the questions are posed, so people don't really get a chance to hear you, and they don't really get a chance to express their support for you. So I would venture to say, given my chant line, as Carol Soskin from Beverly Hills is your big cheerleader here today. She's my sister from another mister. Love her so much. And Janet and Mildred and everyone here. It's important to get the message out. And it's important for us to see you in the context of, you know, a back and forth between you and President Biden and Attorney Kennedy and all of that. But we have heard from the DNC that there will be no debates. What do you make of that? I mean, in a republic that has democratic aspects, right? How's that supposed to work?
Well, we are a democratic republic. We are a representative democracy, and that's important. To say that we are a republic and a democracy is like saying we have windows and we have doors. So, yes, we are a representative democracy. The fact that the DNC is admittedly rigging the primary in order to shoehorn in President Biden as the Democratic candidate is a very bad idea. It is undemocratic. The traditional role of the political parties is to stand back, let the voters decide who the nominee should be, and at that point, the DNC should come in and support that candidate. Right now, you have myself plus Robert Kennedy, who are running to the Democratic election. And also, I think the Democrats are going to have to really think long and hard about what they're doing, given that Cornel West is now running as a third-party candidate. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of rumbling coming up from the bottom of things. People are not liking this. There should absolutely be debates. The president should debate his opponents within the Democratic Party, and it should be the voters in a Democratic primary who decide the best candidate to represent the Democratic Party in the election in 2024.
Have you spoken to anyone in the DNC or anyone on your team? What have they said, if you have, what have they said to you to justify this?
They speak to me through their minions in the media who smear me. That's how they speak. I know that you know this. You have been in the belly of this beast.
And we've had that experience.
You know how this works. This is how they talk to you. You pick up the newspaper and there's some article, or the press secretary is mocking me, or the women on The View. That's how they speak to you. And you know that, and I think most of your listeners probably get that as well.
Yeah, I mean,
they're not playing.
No, they're not. I mean, and as the Lord would have it, Bob Beckel, may he rest in peace, I ended up working with him at Fox News. And he started telling me about a lot of the stories, because he was detailed to handle Reverend Jackson in '84. And he said, I just thought Reverend was the most arrogant, entitled. And I love Bob to death. God rest his soul. And I said, no. I said, he was not arrogant. He was not entitled. I said, I don't think you're accustomed to dealing with a black man, who has a sense of entitlement. I don't think that you are accustomed to a black man who does not feel that he should live in subjugation to you. Oh, yes, I said this. And I feel the same way about you. You are unapologetically who you are. And you are unapologetically, even when people giggle or shift uncomfortably in their seats and you talk about peace, as not just a possibility, but as our new baseline, you don't move. You stay on your principles. I've got 2.5 minutes. I want to give you the runway to speak to this audience. They are very, very interested in hearing more from you and being involved with you. 2.5 minutes, they belong to you, Marianne Williamson.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me on and for the tenor of this conversation. People can find out more about my campaign at Marianne2024.com, and that's Marianne, Marianne. People can volunteer, people can donate, people can go into any of my social media channels. And also for those of your listeners who are in Chicago, I will be speaking at the museum there. I think the Chicago Museum there. It will be on the website on July 10th. And I hope that people will come and hear me. I know for a lot of people it's kind of early to be really getting into this conversation about the 2024 election, but actually early is what matters. I think that's what a lot of people have learned. If you only wait until the corporate-backed candidates have already been chosen, and your only choice is between the corporate backs and then the other party, then we do not create fundamental change. We need to move from a paradigm of amelioration of stress to fundamental economic reform. We need an economic U-turn in this country. We need an economic Bill of Rights. We need universal health care. We need tuition-free college and tech school. We need free child care. We need paid family leave. We need a guaranteed sick pay and a guaranteed living wage. And those things are considered moderate positions in other advanced democracies, and they should be considered moderate positions in ours. And when people tell you that we don't have those things because it's complicated, they're not telling you the truth. We don't have those things because the situation is corrupt. Our government has become little more than a system of legalized bribery in which insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big agricultural companies, big chemical companies, big oil manufacturers, and defense contractors are like an aristocracy in this country. And that such aristocracies have been pushed back before, and it's time to push that kind of thing back again. And I hope that people will go to Marianne2024.com and join the effort because, as we were talking about at the beginning, the system will not disrupt itself.
Well, you have an invitation to come back to the show anytime you wish. And before you appear in Chicago July 10th, come on back here. Stop on by this place.
Thank you.
Anytime you wish.
Thank you.
Sending you so much love.
Very much.
And I will just say this while you're here.
And God bless your father as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I will give him your best wishes, and hopefully you all will be able to see one another when you come to Chicago. You know, I will say this.
I look forward to that.
Oh, I'm gonna make that happen. The fact is, you're not going to get the world you want until you believe you can have it, everybody. You need to believe that it's a possibility. The Lord's Prayer is real. We are but a dimension, a thought away from making real in heaven making real on earth what already exists in heaven. If this is the kind of candidate you want, work for her, vote for her. Do not allow her to be dismissed when you are polled. Don't let that happen. Stop falling for the okie doke. Stop falling for that which is fallen. Rise. Let's rise in love, and let's rise this nation. Let's raise it up. Let's raise up the world. We can do it. We can change the world. I love you, everybody. God bless you. I'll see you on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. And indeed, keep hope alive. Keep it alive. Keep it alive. July 15th through the 19th, Rainbow Push Convention. I love you, everybody. Have a great, great, great day.